We'll do a roll call, please.
Commissioner Neely?
Here.
Commissioner West?
Here.
Commissioner Smith?
Here.
Commissioner Nasita?
Present.
Commissioner Crocker?
Present.
Commissioner Peterson?
Here.
Commissioner Shaw?
Here.
Commissioner Norris?
Here.
Commissioner Walters?
Yes.
Chair Slack?
Here. Can we also go around the room and introduce ourselves?
Sure, I'm Larry Patterson, City Manager.
Daphne.
No, you don't have that. We got David.
I thought we were sorry.
Over there.
David Wimmer, Finance Director.
Scott Archer, Community Services Director.
Nancy Ide, City Recorder?
Colin Miner, or
Ed Darrow, who's the developer.
Randy Tyler, City Director. Jerry Herman, Ray Hudson.
Thank you. Do we have any citizens' comments? Anybody signed up for? No. How have we been doing that? Where we actually do that at a topic as well? No. Jerry, did you mentioned before you wanted to make a comment? Did you want to do that now? You want to sign up?
Sure, I'll sign up.
Okay.
How do I do that? Go out there?
Here
There you
you go.
Why don't you sign up after you speak, and we'll let you go ahead.
What's going on?
Oh, if it's not on one of those?
These are
Okay. Hey, Jerry, I guess, maybe you're going to look at one of our agenda items later, is that? Okay, we'll catch you then.
Okay.
Okay, sorry. Future agenda items. Commissioner Nacita?
I have some future agenda items, but I think it's more appropriate that I raise them during the discussions that we have on the agenda as we go through them.
Okay. Anybody else? Okay, let's get to discuss. I'm sorry. Commissioner Crocker.
A future agenda item I'd like us to look at is possibly finding some kind of a solution or a solution for SDCs and some of the issues that business owners and property developers are having with SDCs. And I don't know if it's an Urban Renewal Commission thing or a City Council thing or what it is, but it's come up and it seems to be hampering future development. And I don't know if I'd like for us to at least talk about potential solutions.
We can give you a report. It would be a commission action, but you might want to, after you hear that, make a recommendation on what your thoughts are on that subject. But we probably need to explain kind of justification for SDCs, what they go for and how it works, and what happens if you don't go that direction.
Well, yeah, and SDCs need to happen, and I understand that, but it is hampering some people from redeveloping. So, and that's not what we want. We want redevelopment.
Okay, so we can put that
We'll
on.
give you the pros and cons and down
Right.
and dirty of why SDCs.
Great.
And you can go from there.
Another thing that I have continued to think about was we had at one time mentioned a tour of the properties that we own as urban renewal, and it's getting closer to rain. And it would be nice to do that in the drier weather. I'm just joking about that.
We can arrange that.
Okay. Number
You may not
four.
like who we have for a bus driver, but we can arrange it. No, I'm just kidding.
We have a bus driver right here,
That's right, a certified
and
one.
I'm cheap. Discussion items, 4A. City Manager?
Yes, this has been on a number of your agendas over the last few weeks, where we haven't had time to get to it, and this was presented back in May, and there's several items on here. Let me just kind of run through and give you a look at these, and then you can determine where you wish to go with it. In regards to the first one, which was changed the day of the Urban Renewal Commission, you discussed that and really said just kind of set these time frames so that you could fit that in, and so that's what we've been doing. again, if you want to rethink that, you can, but so far, I think that is working, and this evening is an example. If the city commission meeting is to follow this meeting, and if this meeting runs over the 6:30 timeframe, we'll just start a little bit later, but, we try to move through these things with as much speed as needed. When you indicated, too, wanted to add to the urban renewal agenda an item titled Adopt the Agenda. I'm not quite sure what you're trying to accomplish there. If you really want to rearrange the agenda, you have the ability to do that at any time. If it's adding items to that, again, I would caution you about the open meetings law, and that if it's a substantive issue, probably needs to be posted well in advance of that meeting taking place. But again, wherever you wish to go with that one. Item 3 was establish a policy that no agenda item will be put forth without the information or documentation pertinent to the agenda item. Question there, again, anything that comes before you usually has some background material. If you feel that you need more, you always can ask for that, and if that's the wishes of the committee as a whole, we can take that on back and bring more information forward. Again, it's really a question, how much information do you need to make a decision, and that's something, as a group, you have to make a decision on. I guarantee you that no matter what we bring forward, we may never satisfy each and every individual on the commission. It's really is the board ready to move forward. 4 is establish a policy that no vote on the agenda will take place within 30 days of the Urban Renewal Commission to consider an item and the information associated with and pertinent to that agenda item. Again, if the board is not comfortable in making a decision, you can always delay an issue. Many of those do have time frames associated with it, but you should never be in a position as a total board that you feel uncomfortable making it. You need to know the pros and cons of the dates and what may happen if you don't make a decision. But again, if you're not prepared to make a decision, you can't really be forced into that position. I will tell you many times that, we're up against the wall, we need to do this. There's always some cost implications, but again, that's a decision of the board as a whole. 5, add a public comment agenda item to the agenda. That has been done. 6 is increase the amount of information staff must present and the Urban Renewal Commissioners must consider in making a decision. I think you did discuss this at a previous session, and again, what's needed there, and that's something that you as a group have to come to consensus on. And item 7, refer major debt funding decisions to the voters for their approval. Again, that's a decision you don't need to make. I think that is probably not a well thought out policy if that's the direction you want to go. Again, it's your consensus. I don't know if anyone's really doing that. And again, if you looked at every issue that or major project, if you were to subject those to a vote, I would suggest to you you'll never get anything done using that approach. But at least not without a lot of expense, a lot of time, and most time in development issues. If you take the type of time to go through that type of step, you'll probably lose any major development that you're looking at.
Okay, what do we want to do here? Do we want to discuss all these items tonight? That was, I guess, kind of our intention. I'm thinking that with all we've got to do tonight, that it's going to be pretty tough to get through these items. Is it practical for us to form subcommittee of the commission and bring back recommendations at the next meeting that we have, or is there Commissioner Nacita?
I'm, just because this has been on our agenda off and on since May, I'm personally not in favor of booting this to a subcommittee. I think part of the reason subcommittees were created is to kill things, and I have a feeling of an undercurrent that that's what's going on in this case. So I would prefer that we just take a fair amount of time and deal with them. We have 2 hours for this meeting, and I don't see, or at least an hour and a half, and I don't see why they can't be dealt with. To help make this short, I will say something about item number 7, just to give the commissioners background and the source of my suspicions about booting things to subcommittees to kill them. This is something that I raised at the City Commission, and my colleagues on the City Commission, the majority at least, did that exact thing with this item. First, they referred it to the City Commission work session, and then at the City Commission work session, they in turn booted it down here to the Urban Renewal Commission. And now the suggestion is to further boot it into a subcommittee. I think I can make the discussion short, that for this...
Before we get into individual items here,
Sure.
We have another hand raised about the concept of doing subcommittees. So let's not talk about individual items until we I think Commissioner Norris had a hand raised at the same time you did. So.
Well, it's not about the subcommittee, because I think that probably we can deal with it here. And even though I was the one that sent the email around about the subcommittee, and I was looking at trying to shorten time, but I think a better way might be to see if there is interest in considering individual items, and if there are, then we can discuss those so that we don't have to discuss them all. So if there's, for instance, Commissioner C is moving number 7, and if there's interest in discussing that, then we determine that, and that seems to be an easy way to do it.
We're actually on the same page, because my purpose in chatting about number 7 was with the expectation that I do not expect from this board a lot of interest in number 7. And I accept realistically that if this is ever going to happen, it will be by the citizens through the initiative process. But I would appreciate at least a straw poll on how many of the members of this commission have even the slightest interest in discussing the matter of potentially giving as a policy, not as a code ordinance or even, but just as an urban renewal commission policy to give the people the right to vote on what we propose.
I'd like to suggest we give this 5 minutes of discussion. That suggests that we have we might have a consensus to it, but I think if we have 5 minutes, it's worth 5 minutes of discussion at this time on number 7.
So you want to go ahead with your presentation on this, your number 7, or
Number
have
seven,
you said
sure.
what?
Yeah. I'll just, in support of bringing it up, I'll just make the statement that I've researched other cities' policies regarding this, and in contrast to the city manager's editorial, it's not that big a deal. The city of Tigard actually has a charter amendment that gives its citizens to right to vote on urban renewal, bond issuance, and plan adoption, and it has not, in fact, scuttled urban renewal. Just in the last November election, the citizens of Tigard adopted a plan for its downtown. And so there's evidence that there's no reason for cities or developers or any other party to fear giving the citizens a say on how urban renewal finance TIF money is spent. The city of Gresham's another city that also has a policy, an ordinance and charter to give their citizens the right to vote on urban renewal measures. I don't see the harm where it's happened. It hasn't created a catastrophe, and I don't necessarily think it would happen in Oregon City. On the other hand, if there's a project like a certain shopping mall that most of the consensus of the community is against, well, they have the right to voice that through the ballot box and deny bond funding or any other type of subsidy for it. So I think it enhances democracy for our citizens, and I think it's something that should be considered.
You make that statement about shopping center. I do not talk to anybody in the people that I talk to that are against it. So I don't know where consensus of community is. That's just my opinion. Commissioner Norris, you had a...
I just want to correct one thing. I've talked to the mayors of those 3 communities because I know that Commissioner Nacita's brought those communities up several times. Those communities vote on whether or not to have an urban renewal district and what the components of that district will be, but none of them vote on debt funding decisions.
I
I talked to the mayors about that.
I read the charter.
Commissioner Neely, you had your hand up?
It had nothing to do with that, and the only way I think we will resolve that was to have somebody look at the charters. So if there's disagreement, oftentimes you can speak to city officials and it does not, even at the highest level, and does not necessarily reflect what the charter says. So I think we'd have
Just
to look at
voted
the
on
charter. So we can look at that particular issue. Just a comment, I'm personally not interested in pursuing that. I think the difference there, Mr. Chair, is that they may not have problem with a shopping center being located in a given place. They may have objections to public money being used to support it. And so I think there is a distinction between those kinds of opinions. And I think that would probably be the major issue that would come up. What we essentially approved here in an urban renewal district was not really that project specific. Although we had specific projects in mind, they were actually the ability to bond funds to the development in given areas of the city. We did have specific projects in mind, but I think the intent was there to go ahead and have funds available that we could have interested parties that would come in and potentially start development with an assurance that bonded money would be available should the Urban Renewal Agency simply agree to that going forward. I think there's I guess I have a little harder time figuring out how to recruit development into an area without a prior knowledge that there, and areas in particular that are blighted areas, and both the Cove and the landfill area is, I think, by almost everybody's definition, blighted. To be able to attract support of people even looking to design any project in that area, unless there's a feeling that there's public support before you even start designing the particular project. And I think that's what we've done. Most of our bonding effort has not been project-specific. It's been area to support those particular blighted areas. And I think even the uncertainty of taking to a vote would perhaps frighten most developers away, because it questioned the commitment to even devote any effort to seeing whether they would want to pursue the feasibility of it if in fact they had no reasonable guarantee of public support for it.
Do we have any other comments? Commissioner Smith.
I would agree, actually, with Commissioner Neely on the last point he made. But I do also think that it is something that should be discussed, and I may be on the minority on that, but I definitely think there's quite a few citizens in Oregon City who are interested in discussing this and talking about it, and I think it's definitely something that we need to consider.
Okay.
If I might, if we come up with a bond, if we come up with an area of a bond commitment, and I'm going to say a new one, we surely could discuss whether or not we wanted to take that issue to the voters or not on an individual basis. But I wouldn't want to make it a blanket policy that every bonded issue would necessarily go to the voters. I think we could look at that on a project-by-project basis.
Commissioner West, did you have a hand up?
No.
No, okay. Do we want to just take a straw vote, as Commissioner Nocita mentions, about whether we want to pursue this farther? I don't think we have enough information to make a decision tonight if we did decide tonight. But do we want to continue looking at this subject? Can everybody kind of give me who would be in favor of continuing? So we got 3.
I would like to see the other policies and have a better understanding how they're implemented.
Okay, is it fair to put this on the agenda again then with some more information? Everybody's in favor of that?
Yeah, I don't think there's anything wrong with knowing what other communities actually
Okay.
do. I don't have any problem with that.
Mr. Patterson, will we put that on a future agenda and develop some information on other communities? Are there other topics that we want to take a look at tonight on this list? That was, I guess, how we were going to approach this subject, general subject. Are there other items here that we want to look at tonight?
I would like
Commissioner.
I'd like to suggest that we eliminate 4. I think we've had a discussion about that before, and I think we all came to the mutual conclusion that 30 days was probably a little too restrictive.
Everybody agree with that?
Yeah.
Okay. Commissioner West?
There's 2 on here that I'm for, number 2, for the adoption of the agenda, and what was the public comment. Otherwise, I'm not for discussing any of these any further, because I feel like we are here to move government forward, and the citizens of Oregon City expect us to make decisions and make them in a time-sensitive manner. And for the most part, how would you define what information needs to be here? I mean, there's no definition of it. So I think that all these other things slow us down in our decision-making. Development's time-sensitive, and that's what I think.
Any other comments? I believe that this adoption of agenda doesn't mean we put new items on there, because I don't think we should.
No, it doesn't. Does that
No,
mean
I'm just reiterating or reinforcing what Mr. Patterson said. But I do believe that adoption of agenda can maybe give us to talk about moving things around on an agenda for the purposes of
Which you have the
either
prerogative.
consideration to people who are here to present or other reasons. So.
Which you have the prerogative to do
Right.
anyhow, with or without that item.
Well, it's a reminder. So.
I just raised it because we have it on our city commission.
Yeah,
agenda,
that's
and I
fine.
just thought, well, why not?
We want to be different than city commissions. Anyway, unless there's an objection, we'll put that on the agenda here. Anything else that we need to look at tonight on this topic? Go ahead, Commissioner Nocita.
Yeah, I do agree with folks that we've been back and forth. I think number 3 and number 6 are kind of similar, and we have discussed those items to some extent in the past. But I want to raise one point about information that I think we should consider, and that is like regular updates on how commission money has been spent. And I'll give an example. As a city commissioner, I get this in the mail, and I find it very valuable. It's just a database spreadsheet on what's been spent. It's a check registry of all the checks and who spent the check and the description of who it went to. And I mean, I as a fiduciary to the public's well-being like to have information on how money's being spent. I don't have that same benefit here on the Urban Renewal Commission. I've gotten reports, for example, from the city manager at public meetings like this, off and on, that we're spending $10,000 to $30,000 a month on consultants' fees for the Cove and the Rivers projects. I have no idea the specifics of what's going on with that fairly large sum of money, and I have no idea on how anything else regarding how we're spending money on the Urban Renewal Commission is being spent. And I think it would behoove us to have some detail on that score on how money is being spent by this Urban Renewal Commission, and I think the citizens would be appreciative of that as well.
I guess
Commissioner Norris.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think the question I would have is, in what form do we want that? I don't think it's very useful to have just a check register. I think it's much more useful to have it against the budget, because I think to have that is to not understand categorically where it's spent. So to me, I know that I've sat here now for 7 years, and I posit that it's a very small minority of commissioners that read through that, because I don't think it's very useful.
Commissioner Neely.
When I first came on the commission, I used to go through it, and then after a while, I simply
Yeah.
gave up. And it's
Just
actually
toss
for
it.
the basically the same reason that Commissioner Norris brings up, that it's not tied to specific budget items. And I think I mean, I think the benefit to that is it's probably a good check to make sure nobody's embezzling money, but it doesn't. It isn't specific to our budget, and I really don't bother with it anymore. I did initially.
Any other comments? Commissioner DeCito, were you going to say something?
I promise that by December I'll stop looking at this then.
You may.
Okay, do we need to deal with this subject any further, or am I getting, Commissioner Walters?
I think it would be useful to have some kind of maybe quarterly report against budget, and if we need detail, I think, obviously we want to save on resources, staff time, but I know that I've had the same question specifically regarding the grant, the Downtown Grants Program, and I think it'd be useful for us to have that measure for all of our budget categories, so that if we do need to have a rebudgeting process, we can
I'll
do
bring
that.
you a report, and if you don't like, in a certain format, if you don't like that, we can continue to change it till we get something that works for you.
And one thing that I've asked downtown Main Street to do is to try to capture these before and afters on these grants. I think, to me, that would be as effective or useful for me to know what we've actually accomplished with the money that we spent, to see the before and see the after. And we're seeing some of that happen before our very eyes right now, and some projects down there. But I think it would be good for this group to look at those on a regular basis as well. So I think Lloyd can maybe help capture that or whatever. So anything else we need to, there's a quarterly thing?
Yeah,
okay.
That's a good starting point. We can see how it goes. Now, lastly, and I'll beg the Commission's indulgence on this. If the Commission doesn't want to discuss it, I'll hold off for now. Earlier this afternoon, I did send out an email that I'm almost certain many, if not most, did not get a chance to look at. But for the agenda item on policies, I raised the issue of something that I think is just terrific. And if Mr. Leland is here, I would want to openly from the dais thank him and Mr. Stastny for this. The 2006 Oregon City Futures Report, especially the progress report and recommendations, is something I commend to everybody to take a good look at. One of the things that it features is a section beginning on page 36 of design and development guidelines. And I studied urban design in grad school, and I've gone back to these documents several times since getting sworn in. And the more I go back to these documents, the more I appreciate them. As I mentioned, the City Commission's consideration right now in its work sessions for hiring an an economic development coordinator come directly from the recommendations in these reports. And the document also includes some very well thought out design and development guidelines that, to me and what I value are very spot on. And I think as far as adopting a policy, Nancy, could you throw up that graphic? Thank you. On page 17 of the booklet, Mr. Stastny has created what I think is a terrific urban design schematic of the North End, and both the key development and the ancillary development. And this document talks about what we have to do to, realize this vision. I think these design and development guidelines are a terrific tool to keep in mind. Everybody's seen, expensive plans that are well-meaning, well thought out, and then they just get, put up on the shelf to collect dust. And again, it takes leadership to actually see that they're implemented. And I want to bring these design and development guidelines to much more prominence and work out a system where we actually review our projects against these design and development guidelines. The document says they're not supposed to be prescriptive, as in a code or an ordinance, That doesn't mean, however, that Mr. Leland or Mr. Stastny could not, for example, in a staff report, draft narrative responses to each of these guidelines as to how a particular project fulfills both the plan, as you know, in its graphic form, and the development guidelines that are in this document. And we've never, to my knowledge, taken the step to kind of formalize review of projects according to these development guidelines. And again, I think they're terrific. And I would like to have a discussion on, you know, formally adopting them as something that
Could we put
should-
that on a future agenda? I mean, I haven't had a chance to look at this.
We don't have a staff
I mean,
report.
that's-
Yeah, we don't, yeah, right.
So, I mean,
No, I don't mind that.
it's
I just
difficult
like-
to...
I just want to introduce, you know, the
Okay.
idea of that.
Commissioner West?
Yeah, we'll certainly need a staff report on that, because as Main Street is coming up with design guidelines, the discussion needs to be that whatever is appropriate is chosen.
Well, could we...
Or they
you
need
know,
to
rather-
be working together.
I think
Yeah.
that's a good point. Rather than trying to make some decision tonight, should we put that on the agenda for our next...
Yeah, I would, if people don't mind, since we have the benefit of Mr. Leland's presence, might want to ask Mr. Leland if he has any thoughts on the matter.
I think it should be for later. I think
He
we
might
should
be
do it.
taking- yeah.
I think we should do it for later so that he has an opportunity
Yes,
to
he-
prepare.
he
I
didn't
mean,
even-
that's not really good to hit a staff person with. Not that David isn't always prepared. He usually is, but.
Well, we might have more, it might be more, well, I think it's going to be more beneficial for all of us if we had time to look
Yeah.
at this and
Yes. We know what
and
we're
to
talking-
interact with Mr. Leland and whatever.
Well, if you need a motion, I will put it forward to put it on the next agenda.
Okay, so moved. We have a second.
Second.
Do we have any discussion? Can we just take a vote with just aye? Aye in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? It passes 10-0. Okay, are we done with item 4A? Item 4B, Mr. Patterson.
This is an issue that we've been through several times. Commissioner Sita has also given you a memo this evening in regards to his thoughts on that, so it's really a question of where the commission wishes to go with looking further at the seismic or the structural ability of the McLean Clinic.
Okay, does the commission have any feel, I mean, we've been through this several times, and Commissioner Neely?
Yeah, the comment I would make is that, and I appreciate this report, I don't know, he talks about a two-tiered, three-tiered analysis. Of course, I've just seen this, and the current times, if we had to go through competitive bid to do this kind of thing and so forth, it might take longer and so forth. What I would strongly suggest is something else that doesn't bear on this particular construction, but that we do, and it'd probably be at the city commission level, review our standards for seismic structures, because we do have a rather extensive area along our waterfronts that on the hazards map are indicated as high hazard areas, and I think we need to look at that issue as a general code issue. But I would think that needs to be dealt with at the commission level, and I would recommend that would occur because we, in my life here in the Pacific Northwest, I've probably experienced maybe 4 or 5 seismic 6+ events. Commissioner Seedacker has mentioned that this area could be prone to have something in the neighborhood of a seismic 9, which is a factor of each seismic position is a factor of 10 worse than one before. So if you took a 9 and compared it to 6, you're talking about something that's 1,000 times worse. Not all of those 9s create tremendous havoc. It depends on how far below the surface they are, but we have had indications that this is an area here that may be due for a very large seismic event, and I think we need to take a close look at this particular issue in general for the city. And my preference, rather than to deal with this building, I agree, it's a public building. I think it becomes more critical, and if you were looking at specific buildings, to look at those buildings in which we felt we had community use in case of earthquakes, where we had to bring a lot of people into in case of earthquakes. City Hall probably isn't one of them. The Pioneer Community Center probably is, and there are other buildings that might serve as refuges in case a big catastrophe occurred. But in general, in terms of our building code, I'd be interested in seeing a study to indicate how our codes stand up and what the implications are in different regions of the city. I think certain regions are far more vulnerable than others, but I think it's really a code issue in general.
Okay, well, so let me get the flavor of the commission. Do we want to go through and make a decision again on this, or do we want to just move forward? Yeah. Commissioner Shaw.
We've kind of gone through this quite a bit, and again, this building right now does meet seismic code. Anything we do from here is, where do you want to stop? Do you want to put this much into it, this much, and keep bringing it up? But right now, it does meet seismic code for an office building that it is. So, and I did review the plans and went through them myself, and it's all there, all the shear panels, brace walls, everything's there to meet office building requirements. Commissioner Neely is correct. If this building is going to have an occupancy of a large number of people, as in the community center, the Pioneer, the senior center, it does have to meet different requirements. But right now, for the use of that building, that's what it is.
I'd like to, if I might, I'm sorry.
Commissioner Neely.
One thing I think would be beneficial in all of our buildings is to, in the event of an earthquake, where is the best place for people to position themselves, and that everybody working in that building actually know where those positions would be. I have heard very conflicting reports as to where you're supposed to be in the case of the earthquake. I know very well that about 20 years ago, people were telling me door jambs were the best place to be, and now I've heard conflicting things. That's one of the worst places to be. I haven't a clue where I should be located in case of an earthquake, and I think it would be very good, frankly, in any of our public buildings to have the people working there at least be informed where in the heck you go in the case of an earthquake. I think there might be a benefit in actually having the equivalent of, in the old days when we were worried about atomic bombs, what we did in the grade schools was
Now
that
dates you.
Yeah, and I think we could do the same thing actually to our public, our workers in those public places to indicate where they should go if we're having an earthquake.
Mr. Patterson, were you going to make a...
No, I was just going to say the best place to be in an earthquake is Texas.
Okay. So, Commissioner Crocker.
Last thing, I'd like to reiterate what Commissioner Shaw said. We've been over this, and the contracted inspector inspected it, said it meets code. Guy Spur, who his office is going to be in there, is that right?
No.
It won't be in that building? Well, never mind.
Not originally. He is in community development now. Eventually, we'll move into that building after public.
He will be in that building eventually. He looked at it. I asked him point blank, would you have any problems working in that building? And he said no. I mean, we're spending a lot of time going over this, and I appreciate the fact that Commissioner Nocita wants a safe building for its citizens, and I appreciate that. But it seems like it's been inspected. Commissioner Shaw looked at it. He knows construction. Everything's there. I say let's move on. I'm all for let's talk about this. This is where I want to go. Let's go here. Let's not get bogged down in the quagmire of do we need a tier 2 or tier 3 analysis of something that's already passed code. Let's move on.
Commissioner Nocita.
If I can kind of close the loop on this discussion. no one is contesting that as being designed and built right now, the building meets code. What I discussed in this memo, and I think is kind of like the genesis of the concerns of the citizens who originally brought their concerns to Commissioner Smith, was should we go to that higher level? Actually, I think the people that approached Commissioner Smith were actually concerned about a meeting code because of whether it had to be an essential facility or not. What I call on the second page of this memo, the teachable moment I find in this whole event is we had a decision-making point that I'm kind of in agreement now is it's kind of late in the game to go back on, where and this goes back to the information issue again, if earlier on we could have made a determination of does this have to be an essential facility and made that decision before it reached the plans examiner, and do we want what level is this being built to, and do we want just that or do we want to go to something higher? There was a point earlier in the decision-making process where that decision could have been made. Personally, if we were to have said, back then, let's spend the money because we want this to be an essential facility, and oh, by the way, building it to the standard of an essential facility would make the building safer just to be in general for the general public. There would have been a policy choice, a cost-benefit analysis as to should we expend those extra funds. I personally would have been in favor of that. But again, that decision has been made as far as building to a Category 2, which is being built to now. I've chatted with folks about this and am confident that the inspections are being done very carefully and that some of the earlier mistakes by the prior owner of the building that were disclosed in Mr. Dean's analysis won't happen under the scrutiny that this building is getting now. So I do want to move forward. I do agree with Commissioner Neely that as this issue has illustrated a need that we could address in a forward-looking manner, reviewing our building codes is a very good thing that we can do for the community.
Okay, then we're going to move forward. Item 4C, IGA between City of Oregon City and the Oregon City Urban Renewal Commission for a loan from City of Oregon City in the amount of up to but not to exceed $2.5 million for remodel of McLean Clinic for City Hall operations.
Yes, Mr. Chair, members of the Commission, this is an item that has been discussed on several occasions. It's also part of your budget as well as the City Commission's budget. This has to do with the funding for the City Hall renovations. What has been recommended to you and has been approved at the Commission level at this point is that the Urban Renewal Commission borrow $2.5 or up to $2.5 million for the remodel. That will be paid back over a 5-year period with an interest rate of 1.5% per year. We're looking at a interest-only loan for the first 4 years with a balloon at the end of 5 with an option to renew should you need to do that. Again, the reason we're doing that is just to create capacity in the urban renewal district so that we can you can consider whether you wish to move forth with the Cove. If you do, that loan is going to be necessary to create that capacity. If you go a different direction in regards to the Cove, you have the capacity to go ahead and pay that loan off. And again, there's no penalty built into this loan for that. Let me go back to that interest rate again. I want to make sure I've got that correct. You can look at the resolution. There's actually two causes, issues with that. It is the principal shall bear interest at the rate of return of monies invested in local government investment pool immediately prior to the adoption of resolution authorizing such loan with a minimum of 1.5, and I think that's at that pool's at 0.87% at the present time.
Yep. Do we have any questions? Commissioner Norris?
I move approval of the IGA between the city and the urban renewal district.
Second.
I would,
Motion and second.
I'm going to ask the city manager, he started this at the commission meeting, the impact on the city budget about regarding this and the funds that in fact are available.
Yeah, that's from the fleet replacement fund. You have a balance in that fund right now of $4.1 million. We anticipate that you're going to have maybe the purchasing of roughly $1 million coming from that fund on top of this, and we transfer into that fund roughly $338,000 per year. So we believe that fund can handle this over the next 5 years.
And that there, in fact, is no perceived negative impact. The fact you may delay purchase of certain vehicles or replacements a year or so in the process does not negatively impact the city.
We do not anticipate a negative impact from this. If so, we wouldn't be going to this fund to do it.
I
If we
know.
ran into that, we'd be looking at transferring some other monies throughout the budget.
Any other discussion, questions? Shall we call the vote?
Okay. You ready? Commissioner Neely?
Aye.
Commissioner West?
Aye.
Commissioner Smith?
No.
Commissioner Nasita?
No.
Commissioner Crocker?
Aye.
Commissioner Peterson?
Aye.
Commissioner Shaw?
Aye.
Commissioner Norris?
Aye.
Commissioner Walters?
Aye.
Chair Slack?
Aye. Motion passes 8-2. We'll move on to item 4D, presentation from Pacific Property Search regarding changes to the Cove Development Plan.
Chair Slack, as the city manager pointed out, we have big discretion to arrange the agenda item, and I'm wondering if, for consistency's sake, we might want to bump up E and consider that now, since it's also on the City Hall, and then talk about D and F next, because they're both on the Cove.
I'm okay with that.
I'd be okay with that.
Okay. So we'll do 4E.
I'm going to recuse myself from this particular item. If anybody is interested in why, I'll be happy to after it's voted on. I'd request to be called in after you've covered this item.
Okay. Item 4E, audiovisual contract for City Hall project with, is it M-A-Y? May Technologies. Mr. Archer?
Thank you, Chair Slack, Urban Renewal Commissioners. The recommendation here is for the approval of the personal services agreement in the amount of $91,188. This is for all of the audiovisual components and technical services related to our city hall. This is not included. Thank you. This was not included in the construction contract, as were a few other items that we've brought forth in separate either contracts or agreements. The reason for that is because the technical nature of the work here, and also because what we're doing is, as I think you might know, in the last maybe couple of years, we put in a new AV system here, and we're basically trying to salvage and reuse as many of those components as we can, which will result in a significant cost savings. So we're taking the majority of the new equipment here and putting it in our new city hall. So that was part of the other reason for doing this as a separate item as well. Essentially, what this covers are all of the services and and all of the equipment associated with projections, all the cameras and the video monitors and all that, and also the audio system, the microphones and the speakers, the remote control system, and also there's significant coordination with our new Granicus system that we put in that you approved the purchase and installation of in a previous personal services agreement. As far as the process of selecting this vendor, this is a very, as I said, it's a very technical and a very complex project. We had our project manager, Matt Newstrom with Crescent Partners, help us write a very detailed RFP that was included in your packet. We specifically sought out 3 vendors that we knew were capable of doing this job. We were concerned about the quality of work in this, and so we went directly to 3 vendors that we knew had the capability and the level of background to do this. One of those is May Technologies, who actually did our system here. So obviously, they've got even higher level of understanding of the system. But we also sought out 2 other vendors who have done this type of work. All but May Technologies declined to provide us a bid. And the reason for that is, and I think this is a little bit, it sounds a little bit kind of weird, but it gets back to, it probably is, the best thing is that the vendor who did the installation is going to take apart the system and put it into place. That was not our intention of doing the RFP this way, although we did seek his proposal. The other two vendors would have been just as qualified to do that, but they specifically said, because we didn't do the current system, it really is not, it's not beneficial cost-wise for them to provide any type of a proposal. And my first question then, of course, in discussing this with our project manager was, well, if we go out and try to find other vendors, will we find any more competitive bids, or will we be in the same boat? So we asked those 2 bidders who chose to be non-responsive, and they said, you're not going to find anybody that's going to be able to do that, because the person that built the system is going to take it apart and put it back together, and they just have basically they have the knowledge of that system. So that's the reason for that situation. And again, I understand that that's a little bit different than maybe some of the procurement procedures, but it is, I think, again, it is what is going to end up working out to be the best scenario, is to have that go in that direction. One other item I would like to mention: there is a video monitor that's included. We have this does include purchase and installation of all of our monitors. We're going to go to a more modern system, which is a flat screen monitor that serves as basically, instead of in the conference rooms, instead of the projectors that you would see typically and then projecting onto some kind of a screen, there'll be monitors that will basically have the ability to either project, for example, a commission meeting or a board meeting that's going on, that folks might be able to use that room as an overflow, or a presentation can be plugged in from a computer. So rather than have a projection in every meeting room, we'll just have a monitor. So we have 3 of those, and that also does include a video monitor that is in the lobby of the City Hall that serves multiple purposes: for public information, for broadcasting of meetings. So while they're going on, if there was an overflow of people, that the room didn't hold enough folks, people could basically be in the lobby and utilize that. There's one monitor in here that it's quoted as a portable monitor system on a cart that rolls around. That was something that we had discussed in an earlier, when we were looking at the Granicus system, to do something that we no longer need that for. So this does not reflect that, but what I'm telling you is that we're going to ask the contractor to provide us a credit back for the exact amount that's quoted in here. So it's about $2,300. So we're asking you for approval of this contract, but recognize that there will be about a $2,300 savings for not purchasing that particular monitor. And again, I just want to emphasize what we're trying to do is maximize the system that we have right now, the components that we're able to reuse and to utilize, and that is what we're doing, because got a fairly new system here, although sometimes some components don't seem to work quite as well. But we'll work those bugs out.
Do we have a motion?
I have questions.
Okay, questions? Commissioner.
My only issue or concern with this is we still have a fair amount of trouble with our audio on our meetings. And with meetings being stopped and started in the middle of things, all of a sudden the screen goes black. I hear from a lot of people about it. And so that's my only concern with sticking with the same. I mean, I'm not saying I'm not, but that's my concern.
Does somebody else have a question?
And they've had plenty of time to work it out.
Yeah, I'd like to hear that too.
Part of the problem is just the type of microphone system that is in here. When we first installed this a couple of years ago, we chose not to dig up the whole floor to put the right kind of microphones that would eliminate some of that problem. In the new City Hall, we have the ability to do it from scratch, from the ground up, and we'll be able to do things right. So we in a sense, we were kind of trying to fix a problem in here that was really difficult to fix. So that's part of it. The other issue is we have an AV tech that's only contract, and he's here just part-time. If we had someone on staff who worked through these issues on a regular basis, who had those abilities, that would be another thing as well. But
So then are we putting in a system that's going to be even a higher technology without the ability of someone to monitor it or run it?
we're putting in a system that is going to be done right from the very beginning, and we also have a contract with an AV tech who will. He'll be able to have the expertise to operate it, operate a system that is installed right from the beginning.
And although we are reusing a lot of the components, especially the bigger cost items, the control panel, if you've had a chance to see that before, our whole recording system and those types of things, but we are going to make the system, I think, better in visual quality, but also our audio system that Ms. I just talked about. But our video quality should improve as well. We're going to be switching to high-definition cameras because that's the standard. That when you build a new system now, that's kind of the bottom standard. So we're moving in that direction. So some things like that will be better than they are right now.
Commissioner Crocker?
Well, my question was what was going to be reused, and so you said some of the.
Correct, and I think some of the audio components as well, the speakers, and Nancy, maybe you have some other thoughts.
Maybe if I tell you what's going to stay, that everything else is going. These microphones are staying here. That projector is staying here for the police department to use because this chambers will still be used for training purposes and so forth. And I think there's one mixer over here that's going to stay as well, and everything else is going. The whole rack, the monitors, the laptops, the mixer, I don't know the names of everything, but just about everything is going.
Commissioner Norris, did you have your hand?
No, I just want to piggyback on, I've gotten so many calls, because at the last meeting, we had no sound at all. So what's that from?
Let's not solve that problem tonight.
Okay.
But
But it sounds as if truly
moving
it's
forward
the
to the next
problem.
meeting. Thanks. Do we any other questions? Were you wanting to say something?
I have one quick one.
Mr. Crocker.
Do we at least make sure we're not paying over list price on these this time? I didn't go through and type out all these and check them out, but I mean, we only have one bid, so we got nothing to compare against.
Did they know that they were going to be the only bidder when they bid?
Pardon?
Did they know they were going to be the only bidder at the time they bid?
No, we told them this is a competitive bidding process. No, absolutely. Commissioner Crocker, I can't tell you that I specifically went through and looked up each item. What I can tell you is what we've looked at this as is kind of a value engineering. We're asking for a turnkey package from a company that has very, very good background, very good experience in this. We believe this is competitive. I did go back to our project manager because I was concerned that we ended up with 2 non-responsive bids, as I described in my earlier narrative. And basically, the outcome of the research that I did was that it is a competitive bid, just because there is only one responsive bidder. We're not getting higher markups and that type of thing. I think the majority of the profit in this is not it's not in the equipment. It's in the professional services, the installation.
Right. Which they're charging separately for.
Yes.
Commissioner Shaw?
Well, that's part of the whole. That's part of the whole package.
Yeah, I was just going to say we're kind of putting a lot of faith in Mr. Archer here, but we're taking all this stuff with us, yet we're still spending $91,000, so there you go.
Yeah, I guess, nobody has the answer to this question, but kind of curious, if you just started from scratch, what would the comparison have been, If you'd have just started with everything new down there and left this here.
A lot more, but I don't know the answer to that. Do you know what we paid for this?
Well, I know that the cameras themselves they're a very expensive ticket item.
Okay.
So that's a large portion of that $91,000. It's just the purchase of those cameras.
You have the cameras, you have those other monitors.
Flat screen
going to be added to this whole thing too, which are all the seats at the.
That was from the
That was
previous
in
contract.
But we do have 3 fairly good-sized flat screen monitors. As I said, one in the lobby of the new city hall that will be used for a variety of public information purposes. 2 in conference rooms, and then in the chambers there will still be a screen that will slide down upon need. There still is a projector in the conference room. The not using projection I was talking about in the actual conference rooms themselves. So that also is included in something that I think also is a pretty good sized cost item.
We have any other questions? We have a motion. Oh, I'm sorry, Commissioner Walker.
I'm just looking at, there's a 1-year warranty for all the labor, and I know there might be some lingering issues. I'm wondering if they might be willing to consider like a 5% holdback, at least for a portion of it. It looks like full payment is due within 15 days after work is completed, and I'm just wondering about the cure period.
A good question. Our policy typically, and we don't do audiovisual systems all the time, so this is not something we do a lot. But our policy is usually a 5% retainage during the project if we have any kind of significant project, a contractor, what have you, until we receive what we think is the final sign off on the project. Then we'd release that 5%. Typically, in a warranty, we don't do a holdback on the retainage through the entire warranty period. The warranty is enforceable with, if we've ever had any issues, we've basically gone to our city attorney and asked them to help us enforce our warranty. I've not had any problems with contractors, but upholding the warranty if we've had to push them.
Yeah, I understand it's unusual, particularly for a year, but I'm thinking, with the 15 days, maybe you want to go for a 90-day 5% retainage. I don't know how far along you are with the negotiations.
We haven't entered the agreement, so at this point, anything is on the table.
I don't know if that's supported by the group or not, but just for some additional cure leverage.
Would you make a motion with that amendment?
I make
to the agreement.
Make a motion that we amend the agreement to.
Well, no, no amendment yet. Why don't you
I
just
guess it would be
to make a motion to approve with the.
With the
You have to wait
change.
to
see
do
if
the
they're willing
amendment afterwards.
to go with a 90-day 5% retainage on the agreement for the just to make sure all the work is completed satisfactorily.
So your motion would be, you want to read the motion for the audiovisual with the add-on?
I make a motion to approve the audiovisual contract for the new City Hall project with May Technologies with provision to hold back 5% retainage for 90 days to allow for additional warranty work.
Is there a second?
Second.
We have a second from Mr. Crocker. Any discussion? Mr. Smith.
I believe that this is obviously a crucial component to the new city hall in communicating with citizens, but so I won't vote against it, but I do not believe it's an appropriate use of urban renewal funds, and so I will abstain.
Any other comments, questions? Could we have a vote, please?
Commissioner Neely is out of the room. Commissioner West?
Aye.
Commissioner Smith?
Abstain.
Commissioner Nasita?
No.
Commissioner Crocker?
Aye.
Commissioner Peterson?
Aye.
Commissioner Shaw?
Aye.
Commissioner Norris?
Aye.
Commissioner Walters?
Yes.
Chair Slack?
Yes. Well, let's see, that will be 7, 1 and 1?
Yes.
7 for, 1 against, and 1 abstention. Motion passes. Would somebody retrieve Commissioner Neely? Tell him he's off break. Okay, did you have any... We reordered this, so should we start with the Cove presentation first or the dredging permit first? Does anybody have any...
Go.
The Cove presentation? Let's look at 4D presentation from Pacific Property Search regarding Cove change, regarding changes to the Cove development plan.
Mr. Chair, members of the commission, as you know, last time we brought the Cove project to you, it had the Kaiser component, and they withdrew. At that time, the developers began to search for a replacement of that. They have found that and have made changes to that plan. We also asked them for some changes in regards to what we needed to have on the ground to proceed, just, again, to create the increment so we can facilitate the financing of our portion of this. We are working to complete the development agreement. I anticipate right now, if we can get all of that in order and Mr. Janik's schedule is free, that we'll bring that to you next week at your Urban Renewal Commission. But prior to doing that, I thought that we should give you a view of this, the changes that have been made in this plan. Again, we had originally had that scheduled for last week, but because of some of the pressing needs around the CHP issue, we kind of reordered the work session and the Urban Renewal Commission. So both Ed Darrow and Randy Tyler with Pacific Property Search, as well as Mr. Leland's here, and they're going to discuss with you the proposed changes. They have discussed these with the Executive Committee. Now I want to present those to the entire board. So, gentlemen.
Chair Slack and Commissioner members, we're delighted to once again have an opportunity to provide you with some additional information. You'll see some things tonight that you haven't seen before, and we hope you'll share our enthusiasm for what we're about to show you.
I think one of the things that Mr. Peterson brought up was the request for changes by the city. We had a viable design before, which included the medical office, and we were pursuing other entities. We were requested to add additional product into the mix so that we would have enough to support the tax increment at a higher level. The only thing that really is out there that's financeable these days are institutional type programs, and apartments are still viable in the finance market. So we redesigned with that intent in mind, but I wanted to just really make you understand that this wasn't a design element that we wanted to change. So when we came back, we sat down with staff to review how we would actually make these amendments. This is not a modification to the overall plan. It's an amendment to the plan. The plan is currently in place and is approved. So we're not asking you to go back and revisit the whole plan. It's just two major items that are being redone. One of the other things which complements the project is a new partner that we've brought to the table, which is Sladen Construction Group, Inc. They are a large institutional construction entity. They do, on the side, from their own account, apartments. The apartment project, which we are going to show you here, is going to be an apartment project which they will keep and keep for their own investment. They're currently the entity that's doing the Tri-City redesign. It's about a $90 million project. They average about $150 million a year in large projects, so we're really happy to have them as a partner. In your little booklet that you have, the first layout here is the redesign.
Mr. Darrow, just for a minute, is it possible to dim the lights so we can see the screen better?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. The two primary modifications are taking and relocating the office complement into this, between the two condo buildings in the center and onto the plaza area. As you recall, originally we had about 80,000 square feet here. This is a large parcel. It's about 11 acres, and it'll support 220 apartments. These are garden-type apartments. It'll be 2 and 3 stories. There are a total of 10 buildings at an average of about 20 units per building. There is a rec building right here in the center. And then to keep that same complement that we think is still viable in the marketplace, and we do have a potential user that we're working with right now, this will be from 80 to 65,000 square feet, depending upon the users. The other thing that will happen in this location would be to bring the restaurants out of the condo in the buildings as they were before and put them in the front of this office building. There is in your packet a review, and I would suggest that you just look at this independently. It's a complete listing of all of the product type that will be in the project, and it's very similar with the exception of those two primary modifications. The phasing is very much the same. We'll be doing the infrastructure work with the city investment, which comes in and modifies this area, brings in the roads, takes the frontage area, rolls that back, handles the grading, and basically moves all of the dirt within the project in Phase 1 and Phase 2. Phase 3, which would be the first level of production vertical, would be the 200 apartments and the office complement. And these are flexible. This is going forward absolutely, and this will be at our best efforts to bring that player to the table to be a user there. Then going into the next phases, we would have condo buildings 3 and 4. That's been modified, and you'll see that design. What we did, in effect, is reduce the size of these two buildings to make room for the office in the center. And actually, I think it's a very nice addition. Some people would suggest that, do you really want to have office in the middle of a residential area? This will actually become the center point of the project, with the potential for having a couple of restaurants and maybe a couple of smaller commercial uses also. So we're actually excited about having that there. The next phase is dropping down to Phase 5, which are the 2 other condo buildings, and then jumping up to the end here to do these last 2. And then the last item, and subject to use and demand, the marinas and the water sports center that's over here would come online directly thereafter. This last building here is the mixed-use building, and we're suggesting that that has the potential for not only be a mixed use, which was 58,000 square feet, but to potentially be a small boutique hotel, or also the potential for having it as a yacht club that would have uses for members and for residents to use it for recreation and also for boat slips. These are the actual changes that go through that we've submitted as an amendment. In the DDA, it suggests that we would do that 10 days after the DDA was approved. We've actually submitted it at this time. It was probably a couple of weeks ago. And it shows and I don't have a copy, but it shows can't read that. Can you read that, Randy? Anybody read that? Anybody here?
Oh, that's the relocation of the restrooms.
Okay, yeah, there was a restroom that was located right here. We wanted to move it just a little area because we're talking about a potential trade of property with the Tri-Cities, and I'll show you that in a moment. These buildings, we did have a discussion in the one of the meetings as to the heights of these buildings. We actually went through as a combination of a couple of items. One, to create a better visual from both sides of the water and on the road side. So these have actually been dropped down a little bit. We have a diagram that shows how those have been modified and the roof lines changed. so that we have a staggered roof line. One of the commissioners, do you recall who that was, brought up that they thought that there was too much of a lineal embankment here.
It was Commissioner Lajoie.
Yes, and so we've made those modifications. Then we have the relocation of a couple of the roads, which are here, over here, and here. We eliminated those just so we wouldn't have so many access points coming out onto Agnes. Main Street was actually pulled back and was over here for the last program because we didn't need a total of 11 acres. What Kaiser wanted was about 9 acres. So we had moved the road back here and did all the design work for that, and actually had submitted that, and that was what was approved. To get enough area to have a nice complement of apartments, we moved the road back to where it is existing, which will actually save us some funds, and that road is being modified. Then we've added a rec building over here, and where this road was back here, we've taken that rec building out. And then we're suggesting that there is a potential different uses that we could do, and we'll show you those in a moment. But we also, there was a small encroachment here where it went over the line and was approved, but we said, well, if we're redesigning, let's just pull that back out. So that's the major changes. This kind of shows the complement, the mixed-use area, the 220 apartments, and then the number of condos as you go across here with the office building in the center. And this is a whole new element here. When we had originally moved through with the plan, we had sat down with Tri-Cities to discuss how we would work jointly and how we would be doing complementary architectural design vocabulary. We have done that with them, and part of that process, they had requested that we move a building out of here, which was about a 40-unit building, which is about $20 million worth of product. We said, all right, we will do that as a good neighbor because they didn't want us to be within a 500-foot area of their treatment plant, which probably made some sense anyway. But in doing that, we requested that this 11 acres, which they have over on this side of the road, be permanent open space. And we had designed a small parking area in here that would help complement the public efforts. When we came and moved this office building over here, we went back to them and said, what we really need is 2.5 acres that will support all of the public uses that we're talking about now and would have a reciprocal use for the office building. So that has not been approved by them. What they came back and requested is that this little piece right here is about 20,000 square feet. This is 2.5 acres. That be deeded to them, which is part of the city's area. We did have the restaurant right here, and we had a little bit of extra parking. So with this new parking area, with this as a give-up, the intent would be to do a land swap. And one of the issues is not to do necessarily a taking of title, because this is part of a landfill. Our recommendation is, and our request to both Tri-City and the city, would be that we get some sort of a perpetual use that would be a lease, and that this would not disturb any of the landfill area underneath. It would be a concrete post-tension floated parking area, about 250 spaces. So it really makes a very nice use. We have done this exact thing over at the Oswego Point project, where we had a reciprocal use where the city was allowed to use it for public events on the weekends and the evenings when it really wasn't being used by the office space. So it's a nice way to complement it, and it saves a heck of a lot of money by not having to go subterranean to create parking for the office space. You can probably read this in your book, but this is basically showing each building, building 1, 2, and 3, showing what we eliminated to create that roof line change. We knocked out this unit, dropped a whole floor across this building, dropped out this unit, and then took out these 5 floors here. That brings the building down to this size, and this size, and the same thing happened on the other end. So we went from 224 units down to 180. It's a pretty substantial drop. When you look at the overall increment that will be there, we actually increased the amount of value of the overall project up to almost $181 million. When we originally submitted, I think it was $168 million. This is a site plan just showing the apartments Part of the issue here was how do you bring the whole thing out of the floodplain? We now have all the parking out, and we have each of these buildings out of the floodplain. It required digging a hole here. It'll be partially used for a water feature. There'll be a suspended pool that kind of hangs over it. And in a couple of areas where it's kind of graded down, there'll be piling that will support the apartments, which actually will be a very nice look. These, and having built thousands of apartments ourselves, we go through and we actually price the units differently depending upon their view quarter. All of these units in this area here will have a very nice view and would be a higher rent. These here and these corner units all will be looking out at the cove. So we've only got a couple of units that really aren't being focused onto a major green belt or onto a water view. So it becomes a real nice project. This is an elevation that's a little 3D mock-up, giving you another look at it. The elevation of the building, these are conceptual designs and could have some modification, but we really wanted to articulate the outside elevation. A lot of times you'll see the lesser priced garden type apartments, there won't be any pop outs, it'll be just straight across, it'll be a flat surface, and you'll have some suspended balconies. So I think this will be a very nice looking, it's actually one of the nicer ones that we have worked with. An overview, looking at the apartments here, looking at the offices, and then the other products. We have the amphitheater still over here. As you come into a view from the back, this is the parking area, 2.5 acres. We're talking about doing a covered walk area. The potential is, subject to a pricing, would be that we could actually have an elevator that would bring people out of here into a covered area and then into the office building. So these are conceptual designs at this point. Getting down into a little closer view, the city requires that there be a front entry here, so there's some redesign that needs to be done in working with staff. Looking at it from the water side, it becomes a very nice use. These will be open areas, plaza areas here, here, and over here, and subject to the users that we would bring to the table, it's a possibility to have this bottom floor, both sides, to be restaurants. And you can see how the building here has reduced. It actually had 3 more units on it. That would have made it all the way across. The other nice thing is that it breaks the horizontal line of the roof elevations. And you can see how the plaza works here. There's not only plaza over here, out here, and here. It's all across here and on both sides. So it makes a real nice public area, and that will be for public. This is the little area that the 20,000, 21,000 square feet that Tri-City wants. This is their new improvement area that they're talking about for the administration building, and this is for future expansion here. This would be Agnes coming up here, connecting down into our project. So it really doesn't impact us having that piece go. We just move the bathrooms over here, and we would be picking up substantially a greater area. This is showing the 21,000 square feet and the 2.5 acres here that we are going through a negotiation with them at this time. The mixed-use building, as it's currently designed, it has the potential for the restaurants in the bottom area here and about 58,000 square feet of office. We have alternative uses that could make this into a yacht club and a full rec area. And a small boutique hotel. This is an elevation that we would consider using for the yacht club, for the recreation, and for the boats. We had another little section here that was showing all of the impacted areas of the site, but it doesn't run on this particular computer. So I think that kind of opens it up for discussion.
Do we have to have the pirate flag in the yacht club?
Yes.
I'm glad you noticed that.
We have questions from the commissioners. Commissioner Neely.
This is new enough. A couple things jumped out at me. One, the fact that you're not essentially moving the footprint of Main Street extension there suggests that we're going to lose the pathway on the cove side of the project. That is a pedestrian pathway. You don't show one, and it looks like you might have one that extends along the periphery of the apartments, but that would entail people that are using the pedestrian bike pathway along the cove would have to cross Main Street in order to access the other pathway, if that's true.
We discussed that with WRG. Did you get the final result on the ability to design
No,
that?
I have not seen that.
The intent was to keep it on that same side of the street, and I think the final designs will in fact show that.
Along the cove, then?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
The other thing that struck me was the functionality of the new Agnes as a public road with this new office center in the parking lot across the from what I saw in these patterns, it looked like the parking lot was on the opposite side of Agnes from the office complex. It looked like it was somewhat constricted. I assume this is going to be a public road because the access to the kayak non-motorized boat launch there, I would assume, would be made off of Agnes. Is that right?
That's correct.
So this is still going to be that's still going to be in public road ownership. Yes. I was just wondering how if the use of that road around the office complex and its parking lot there is going to be fairly congested.
You know, we had a brand-new traffic analysis done, not only for our own purposes, but for ODOT's purposes, because we had in place an agreement with ODOT as to the uses, and it does show that it's complementary, that it does work. So we went through and did that additional analysis.
One of the reasons that it works is...
Can you use the microphone there, please?
One of the reasons that it works is because the office buildings and the recreational public activities in the parks have peak traffic times that are different. They're not all hitting at the same time. In fact, that's why the reciprocal parking works. But we'll check with Kittleson and bring up that issue and get back to you.
Commissioner Smith.
In the past proposal, there was discussions regarding the possibility in the future and planning for a possible opening or connection between the shopping center. And with the change in plan of the apartments, I don't know how that affects that discussion. And my fear would be to forever cut off a connection to the shopping center in the event that is redeveloped at some point too, and so maybe you can speak to that.
Yeah, it is a mandatory requirement by staff, so it just hasn't been shown as a connection. The intent was going into the apartments. If you could make this thing go backwards, I could show it here. I can't get it to go backwards. Effectively, the entrance would come through here. This has been redesigned a little bit, and the road now goes straight through here and comes back here without parking on both sides, so that it could come directly here and go into the center. So that connection will be in the final plan.
You said that was required of staff?
That was a requirement of staff.
I don't understand what you mean by that.
The road...
No, the mandatory requirement by staff. Which staff?
Your city staff.
Yeah, we haven't heard anything about that, and I'd like an explanation about it.
Well, then staff could probably give you the explanation. They had the same feeling that Mr. Smith did, Commissioner Smith, that it was a good idea to have that potential connection and not cut it off, but I'll let them talk to it.
We have something else.
No,
Right, cool.
I'm in favor of the connection, the preservation of the connection. I just want the details of the discussion.
Well, let's see. How far back do you want to go?
Well, I'll tell you what, since Commissioner Crocker was saying the plan, let's go back to the plan, because the plan shows a very distinct connection, including an extension of a street through the Oregon City Shopping Mall into this site. So that's just how far back I'd like to go.
And yes, we've been following those plans.
But that's not demonstrated in these graphics.
Yeah, but the discussion, and if you recall, if you go back even at the Planning Commission level when this was approved, early on when this was brought forth to the Urban Renewal Commission, which probably did predate your membership on this committee at this time, there's always been a requirement for some type of connection to the shopping center. That's one of the things we try to do with policies, that connectivity, so that you can move folks in and about that. The plan as originally designed, there was some discussion if we could have worked an arrangement with the shopping center to maybe take that road through the center of it. That hasn't materialized because the ownership there at the shopping center has continued to change hand, and they have not been part of this, but we still want to preserve the ability to make a connection at some future date whenever maybe some agreements can be worked out there.
So the case would be to establish a right-of-way then?
Yes.
That would enable that to occur, is that right?
Even when we had the Kaiser program, the staff had required that we make a connection even though it wasn't shown in the drawing. So it was a condition of approval that was actually put into the plan. And that was connecting back here and into the center.
What we'd want is dedicated right-of-way right up to the property line of the shopping center.
And we're prepared to do that.
Any other questions? Commissioner Walters.
I like the changes. Thank you. You folks have been responsive as far as adding more parking and breaking down the real monolithic character of the previous version. Curious if you're looking at anything like geothermal loops or any kind of solar technologies or passive heating and cooling. What kinds of things are you looking at to build long-term value for the residents of this community?
We're doing several things that would relate to LEED. What is it? LEED.
Can you put the...
Oh, sorry. The LEED neighborhood classification of use. And in that, there are a number of things in terms of rain shield, rain. What's the specific name
Rainwater
of that?
recovery.
Rain gardens. There's like 4 different things that we're doing on the ground that help in the treatment of the water before it goes back into the cove. There are incentives for use of solar activity, whether it's for hot water or electricity. But right now, they're still trying to figure out how, in a condominium development, who gets the award. Because if the purchaser gets the award, then there's not much of an incentive for the developer. But there's work going on right now trying to figure out how to make that, how to achieve that in the most reasonable fashion.
Great. And are you also looking at green roofs at all?
I don't know that we have.
Okay, thank you.
They're all not too flat.
One of the other issues too, and I think Mr. Darrell kind of touched on this, is by reducing the condominiums with the addition of the apartments, we feel that we've kind of balanced the impacts of this. So again, I don't know if we've heard back everything from ODOT as well. As you remember, that was a big issue in regards to the impacts, but we think with this reducing of the condos and the additions of things here, we still have the same type of impacts that we had before, so we don't think we'll be going back through that portion of that.
Commissioner Nocita.
First of all, I'd like to say compliments on the office building integration into the condominium project. The design before, as Commissioner Lajoie had pointed out, was kind of a wall, and I think this is just an order of magnitude improvement, and it's really compelling. I'm very pleased, and I thank you for that. A couple of questions. Status-wise, what is the status of the methane issue that was on the former Kaiser site?
We're going through with the DEQ right now. We're going in and asking for a prospective purchaser agreement, which would be specific to this property, and to actually get a no further action letter. They have been phenomenally complimentary and helpful in doing that. We are currently under a contract for $65,000 to do groundwater sampling. The methane has already been analyzed. Their request was that we go through and do this additional analysis, which is the groundwater. The idea there being that if there is a contaminant at that level, then what does it do to the down gradient? The holes have all been punched, the wells are in. We should be getting reports back within a couple of weeks. The intent would be, if in fact that first round is good, ordinarily they require 4 rounds of sampling through different seasons. Because of the urgency and the public benefit of this particular project, they have said that they would do it in 1 round. So it's a pretty nice effort on their part. So they have been very cooperative, and we're doing the work to get that finalized.
And another question is, at an earlier meeting, there was a discussion of the ordinary high water line within the cove. I saw emails that said we'd have information in 2 or 3 weeks. It's been months now, and I'm just wondering what the update is on that process.
Yes, that's taken longer than we had thought. Information going back and forth between our engineers and the consultant who did the determination of the ordinary high water line and the Corps of Engineers. The last thing I saw was a request from the consultant to have the engineers provide some additional data on the plans and on the sections. But they are supporting the elevations that they had supported in the past, and apparently that's all been approved by the Army Corps of Engineers. They're just waiting to get these final drawings that depict that. And they show the ordinary high water line between 16 and 18 feet elevation. Now, I know there have been some discussion of, well, how could it be that further down the river, the ordinary high water line is higher than where it is here? And they say, well, that doesn't make sense logically. Apparently, there are a couple different methods of determining the ordinary high water line, and those that are showing the higher water are actually using an outdated methodology. And the Corps supports the revised methodology that determines what's the location of the woody material along the shore. When you look at the shore there, you can pretty well eyeball where the high water line is.
That was done by our third-party consultant, the Pacific Habitat and the Corps together. They spent the afternoon out there and walked the whole perimeter of the property, and Randy went with them also. And they agreed with the analysis of our consultants that it was, in fact, the correct level, which is 18.
Any other questions?
I have other questions and comments, but I wanted to let others.
Commissioner Neely, you had your hand up.
One of the things, of course, that's come up before is was the tree canopy along the shore. I don't know if you're revising how you're going to look at that in terms of your cut and fill. I would imagine it would be problematic to you to, based on probably the land material you're going to need to do a whole lot about it. But I would suggest that you look seriously at the use of the woody material, perhaps elsewhere in the broad spectrum of perhaps the Clackamas River property that's owned by Tri-City Sewers, perhaps the peninsula, where the woody material might be used for creatures that live under logs and that kind of thing, and whether there, in fact, some of that woody material can be integrated into the waterfront at different points and so forth as well. I know when we had some discussion here, when we had the representatives, I believe it was from U.S. Fish and Wildlife as well as the Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife, that cottonwood, of course, decomposes very rapidly, but I think it still might have use in some areas for enhancing wildlife.
Yes. And I did meet with both of those gentlemen, along with John Van Stavern, who's our wetlands consultant. And they talked about a couple of ideas. One of them was to get that woody material from the trees actually into the water and not do it all the way along, but intermittently, and then also do some sandy beaches, which they said would be good, obviously, for recreational uses, as well as creating habitat for some fisheries. So we're in the process of talking with them about that. And in many of our projects, we've gone above and beyond what's actually required to be done. At Tidewater Cove, we built some large new wetlands that weren't there before and that weren't a requirement. We did something similar at South Shore on the beach and the ocean at Newport, where we not only didn't fill a wetland and mitigate, but we did some wetlands enhancement and planted a bunch of materials that added to the food capability of that area. So we like to do things well.
The major opponents on that project, when we started this project, there was a request for letters of recommendation, so I called those opponents, and they actually wrote us a letter of recommendation, which was kind of unique, because Fran Recht, who kind of leads the anti-development along the coast, actually wrote the letter. And that was because we went way beyond what was required and actually did a lot of work. Randy coordinated most of that. Same thing in Lake Oswego, in the greenway where we cut materials. Those were left there for the habitat. We did a very substantial program there. And it's always been every project we do, we go beyond, and we like to, if anybody's got additional ideas of things that make sense, we are open to those ideas.
What I would request of you is, as those ideas develop and so forth, to actually bring them back to us and discuss how that's going to be approached.
Definitely.
Anybody besides Commissioner Nocita that wants to ask a question? Commissioner Nocita, go ahead.
Okay. Thank you. Commissioner Neely actually brought up the discussion I wanted to undertake, which was about the shoreline riparian trees. It's still kind of like the thing that is the most problematic for me. And one of my concerns is that I don't think it has to be problematic. And I wrote the commission an email about this earlier today. I don't know, Mr. Garrow, if you had a chance to see it before.
I did. I went through it.
Okay. You've mentioned, I assume you were referring to Oswego Point when you referred to the Lake Oswego project that you were just mentioning.
Yes.
And that project does have trees still standing between the condominiums and the Willamette River and shoreline shading, etc. And it looks really good. I mean, it really looks terrific. And I still believe that we could create something similar here, whereby trees could be pruned so that the bottom third or 2/3 of the tree you could see through them, see the nice cove through those, nice stems, but still leave a canopy shading the shoreline for the the species like trout, salmon that use it as a rearing habitat. And I think another concern I have is that it seems to me, and again, as a new commissioner, I don't have some of the same background on this, but I've never really understood what's driving that desire to clear those trees. The grading idea of clearing the trees and moving the dirt from right there up to the building paths is one way to do it. It's not the only way to do it. Nancy, could you throw up again that page 17 of the urban design plan that I had? Sorry. We've been in a discussion here in the city presented by our Public Works Director, Nancy Ide.
Fresh hour. There's a little difference.
And Nancy Krusshauer gave us a presentation on the fill that would be needed for. Any chance of blowing that up? I don't know. She pointed us to the area between I-205 and the Union Pacific Railroad, which Commissioner Smith and I had a chance to walk with some citizens a couple of weeks ago. It's I mistook it for a remaining pristine remnant of the wetland that used to be that whole area, but I was mistaken. It's actually a former wetland area that has been filled, for example, with sawdust and debris from a logging operation. And you walk through that area, it's just huge. I mean, it's just an enormous amount of fill. And she gave us a presentation suggesting that we excavate for the cut balance for some of the road bed of the jug handle, that we excavate some of that material for the cut balance fill for the jug handle. And it seems to me that we could do the cut balance fill by finding the cut within that large area. I mean, it's the floodplain. It doesn't have to be on the same property. It doesn't have to be within the cove even. It could be somewhere else within that large flat area of the confluence of the Willamette, Clackamas rivers, that we could fill for the condominium beds and leave the riparian cover along the shoreline. And that, to me, would be just a really happy solution to the problem. Since the reason I bring this graphic up and talking about sticking to the plan, what I didn't realize, I see new things in this drawing all the time, and one of the things I noticed is that the graphic actually has a hotel right up there at Washington and 213 with some what appear to be little finger docks leading down to a water body, like a little lake there, which I think is a terrific idea, or a wetland or something. So that using that area to find fill to place in the cove development and doing the cut, fill, and balance both for the jug handle, because I think there will be stuff left there even after we excavate that, or finding other pockets within that whole area that we could find the appropriate amount of fill for the condominiums, and leave those riparian trees, but prune them so that you'd still have some view and still have a shade cover, because the drawings I've seen on this graphic does not show shading along the shoreline. It shows little clumps of some restored habitat, but maintains a view corridor for the condominiums. And in the balancing of values, I just don't see that we need to go to that extreme of sacrificing that much ecological value for the incremental value of additional view, when we could achieve much of the same thing through just pruning the trees and leaving the tree cover there.
We did it at Oswego Point. We had the Willamette Greenway. The rest of the project, almost 95%, was no trees at all. We planted $348,000 worth of trees, because I walked around and actually spotted where they'd be planted. We had a visual corridor that we recorded, that we could go through the greenway and just cut little spots and maintain that over time. If this particular area was worthy of that, we would do that. The reason that we're doing it is twofold. One, the grading doesn't even compare with Oswego Point. It's a nice gentle slope going through the greenway. I remember walking it with the city staff and saying where we're going to put little paths through it. It was easy to do. It wasn't anywhere near the hazard that you have on this particular property. And if you look at Oswego Point, having absolutely no trees, go over there and just walk that project now. You can't even see the buildings. We're actually cutting and clearing some of the trees out. That was in less than 20 years. We had phenomenal trees. The expectation here is not to look at the short term, it's to look at the long term. The area is degraded. It's really, if you go out there and walk the edge or even try to get down to the water, you're in trouble. We don't want that. We want it to make it a very usable thing, not only for the residents, but for the public. And every project that we do, we bring the public to the property.
Okay. The issue I have, I think, with that is if you have a ordinary high water line of 18 feet, then you're still going to have a steep embankment unless you apply for an Army Corps permit. Because to make that gentle slope, you are going to have to do something that would require an Army Corps of Engineers permit.
No, that's not the case. We've gone through that very extensively with our engineers and with our environmentalists. The intent is not to go into the water. We'll actually be grading it back up from the 18 and a little bit higher.
But at 18 down to the water line,
No.
you will still have a steep slope.
No, it's. I don't believe that's the case. Randy walked it. I didn't actually walk it. I've walked it other times, but with the actual engineers and with the Corps, I don't believe that's the case, is it?
No, that's not. And we like trees. We've saved trees whenever we can. We had got into some big arguments with the city of Lake Oswego about trees that they wanted to take out, some of the biggest trees on State Street. And we said, hey, you're crazy. You shouldn't be doing this. We figured out how to preserve them. We changed the traffic patterns around and were able to save those trees. But in this case, if that section of the site were completely devoid of trees, we would still want to take the bank down. We want to take it down for several reasons. It's too steep, it pollutes, there's little landslides that go down in there that are not good for the water quality. It's unsafe. There's no place that you could reasonably get down there except at one end or the other end. There's no place in between. It's very steep, and it's not a safe thing for public.
As you know, I've walked the site many times myself, and I guess that'll just remain a point of disagreement between us.
Well, I think that, and I really want to impress upon you the fact of the long-term view. To leave it like it is and plant at the top of that slope additional trees, which we'd do if we were going to leave it, will ultimately just keep eroding. The intent is to create an exceptional area for the public and for our residents, and that's what we've done on every project. We don't just look at it and say, well, how do we get dirt? When we get to the level of actually talking about dirt, right now, Tri-Cities has an extra 75,000 yards that they want to get rid of. We're in negotiations with them about using that. That's a potential opportunity. The ultimate thing, we are balanced right now, and that's after probably $600,000 worth of engineering. Since we talked to you last, we've spent another $200,000 going through and engineering the whole site. It has been a very, very extensive process, and we think it's going to be ultimately a very delightful place. So we are giving up something, which are current trees, for future trees, but future trees that are going to stay, and future trees that will be the right kind of trees, be the right kind of habitat. And the clumping of them isn't so much to take and have an absolute open view, because my architectural point of view is that you don't really want to just have a big open area. You want to actually look through the trees. And so you take, instead of cutting out a tree, you would cut limbs out, and you get that feel through the trees, which is actually a much better look than just having a big blank shot out from the condominium. So that's not our intent at all. The idea is to plant trees along the whole perimeter and do major clumps in certain areas.
Hey, Commissioner Crocker.
Two-part question. Number one, what's the construction landscape look like right now? Is it still a good time to move forward with this kind of stuff? I mean,
the intent is to look at some minor grubbing in the November-December time, and then start actually formal bidding, because at the first of the year is the best pricing you can get.
That was my question.
Yes.
Is it still very competitive? And
It's
we
phenomenal.
can drive a hard bargain, basically.
It gets better January, February.
Is there any reason? I appreciate Commissioner Nacita's concern for trees. I agree wholeheartedly, and I'm not an engineer, so I don't know what's involved. But is there any way, since we're able to do this at a time when it's good to be building, can we earmark a certain percentage of the dollars for some mature trees? I know you guys have talked about buying big trees, right, and bringing them in. Can we earmark a portion of the money that's going to go to this? Since, in theory, we're going to be able to save some money on contracting costs and so on and so forth. Can we earmark some money for some big, mature clumps of trees?
I think we can go through the plan, and if it's not showing that, define it. I've gone through the plan, but I haven't gone through and looked at every item on it. And every project, just like Oswego Point, I went out with the subcontractor didn't like what they priced, so I did it ourselves. We had our own construction company at the time, and I went out and we actually bought the trees, went out with my contractor that ran my company, and we picked out all the trees, and we were able to buy phenomenally big trees. We bought those big blue cedars for almost $200 a tree, and they're like 25 feet high. So, I mean, we will go out and do it right. Once again, it's like we don't do several projects. We do one project every 2 to 3 years, and to do it right, that's our goal. So we'll definitely look at doing that.
Commissioner Neely.
Yeah, I'd like to come to this issue of the habitat. It's been a long time since the industrial uses of this area have gone away, and I think the reason that you see the cottonwoods along the edge is because there's sufficient water to support the cottonwoods there, and you see almost no tree growth or the very poor tree growth in most other areas, and that's because I think of the land uses existed there for its industrial uses at all that time. I am sure that if it's done correctly, the total extent of the riparian area will be dramatically increased under your recommendations. I think part of it is that your pictures that you show do not reflect what you're saying in terms of the tree frontage. It looks like you've got these small, sparse little trees here, and that may be what it looks like when you first plant those trees, but it's got to change. So I don't think it's a picture of your view and what might be there in 15 or 20 years.
No.
And I think that's part of the issue that's before you. It doesn't show that. I am going to say that trail is used more heavily and more heavily week by week. More people learn about it. That bridge was closed because of a fire on it, that pedestrian bridge. It's open now, and the use of that pathway is just increasing. When you go into this construction process and you stop the use of that pathway, you're going to have a lot of angry people. We're going to have a lot of angry people be directed at us. And in fact, when you cut those trees down, you're going to have a lot of angry people. No matter what your ultimate plan is, you're going to face a major outcry. We got that probably for better reasons on the Willamette River. It's going to be a lot worse on this one because there's already pedestrian access along this particular corridor that's being used and so forth. And somehow you've got to indicate in a broad picture to the public, whether it's on poster boards and so forth, what this is going to look like. And if these pictures that you show in terms of what the riparian area is what you're going to show, I don't think it's going to be deeply appreciated because it really doesn't show what you're talking about.
Well, I think the problem is that is a schematic, it's a concept, it's a model done in a SketchUp program, and if you look to the actual landscape plan, it's a very nice plan.
And I understand that, and that's why I say you are going to expand the riparian corridor dramatically in that plan, and I'm aware of that. The other thing I want to make, you talked about blue cedar and so forth. I expect you're going to actually follow the requirements that we have along riparian corridors of planting indigenous species and go by the list that we have for the indigenous species that would go there.
That plan is actually into the city and available.
Yes.
So, and it's a very extensive plan, and if anybody wants to go through it independently or even go through it with our landscape architect, we'd be more than happy to even modify it. But the intent is to do it right and to have it come out very nice. When we did the Oswego Point, we did the path, dedicated that to the city. It was 8 feet wide, a lot of use. When we did the next project over on the Columbia, we increased it to 12 feet, phenomenal use. We're going to 20 feet here because of the other venues that can support. So I think that it's going the right direction, and I think one of the things that we could do, because of what you just said, is do a temporary path while we're under construction that would push it back towards the Tri-City side, which would be the back side of Agnes, so that we could actually maintain a thing. And if somebody will make a note of that, Randy.
I don't want to cut this discussion off, but we have another body that would really like to begin their meeting soon. So, unless there's some crying We're gonna actually look at this again at the next meeting when we look at the development agreement.
I actually do have one question that I did really want to get in this meeting, in that we started off this meeting with a discussion of seismic issues. Commissioner Neely raised a reference of the fact we have hazard maps that show our shoreline very vulnerable. This is fill area here, and we're putting fill on top of fill. And I'm wondering what, how you are addressing the seismic issue. For example, are the footings of the condominiums going down to the basalt bedrock underneath all the fill?
When we go through the structural design elements, we bring in a third-party consultant that gives us all of that detail. We have not done that at this point, but when we built the project in both Lake Oswego and the project that was built over at Tidewater Cove, we brought those people in. They brought in all the issues of liquefaction because of the siltation that was there. It was necessary to put pilings in certain areas. That's dictated 100% by a very technical approach to it, soils analysis, and it'll be done right. That report will be available.
Thank you.
Okay, great. Let's move on to, we do have a public comment from Jerry Herman on this, on the, no, it's on 4D, the code.
Yeah, 4D, the zoning card there. Yeah.
We can pass them.
We need your name and the city you live in.
Absolutely, absolutely. My name is Jerry Herman. I live in Oregon City, unincorporated Oregon City. I'm testifying for the 5th time in support of this project, and though you might have thought I wasn't in support of the project about some concerns related to trees, I still have some of the same concerns Commissioner Nocita has, but I also have some of the same opportunities. I believe the same opportunities are possible that Commissioner Neely has talked about. First of all, what you have in front of you, I just want to let you know something. Down at our site, the River Resource Museum, we have a recovery program, too, about celebrating recovery, and I work with at-risk youth. We're about 15 people there now enrolled in this program, and I thought you might want to be aware of this. That's what I do there, and I employ those people to run a nursery, to do all sorts of planting projects in a number of areas. We're doing a lot of work in Gladstone, but specifically what I wanted you to be aware of is that I see changes in the plan. The road has been kept in its present position, Main Street extension. That's going to save about 45 trees. I know there's 160 trees on our site that are not going to be touched at the River Resource Museum and adjoining city lands. There's another 90 trees going down the 1,000 feet of road that I maintain that are not going to be touched. There's 220 trees on the isthmus that separates the cove from the river that are not going to be touched. And I also understand the difficulty these developers have with dealing with the adjustments to slope as proposed on the east side. I like the idea of the lake complex, which is now at Glacier Northwest, should say the former cement-producing plant. That could be another habitat aspect that was not possible under the hospital office building scenario. But I think there's something we're still missing here, and that is celebrating the fact, one, what this place was. This was an aggregate-producing site, all right? I think that there are grants and other aids out there that are available from industry and the Oregon Wildlife Heritage Foundation and NOAA Fisheries. You heard from Ben Meyer here last time I was here about 2 months ago from NOAA Fisheries, who has funds available to help with significant projects. And the Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife also has funds in Metro. My point being, I would like to encourage the developers. They've already talked about this to form a working group. They invited me to be a part of that. They've already talked with some of the agency folks, which I know have been to visit you. You saw at least 2 of them last time you had this type of meeting, to work together with a working group to see what other possibilities for federal, state, and other Wildlife Heritage Foundation funds might be available to soften the project even more. And I included a diagram on the last page, which I know you're going to hear about in a minute here, about maybe what could be done with some dredge spoils. And it wasn't my intention to even do this, except Todd Alsbury, who you heard from Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife, the regional director, said, what can we do with those dredge spoils? I don't like dredging. I don't want to support it. I'm against it. but couldn't we use this material internally in the cove? And so that's just a concept. It's not anything to be considered, you know, in a final form, just a concept. But I would like to really see this working group attitude where people with agency experience that are not bound by the 18-foot number. You know, I was a hardcore person about that number. You remember that. 18 feet I thought was wrong. Well, if it is 18 feet, it's a regulatory line. That's all it is. Below that line, state and federal regulations come to bear. Above that line, they do not. I think it's time to forget the line and look at what we can do to help them make the project even better. The agencies are going to have to give. They're going to have to let them do work below that line. And the city is going to have to be willing to embrace the agencies helping.
Jerry, we have to...
And the long and short of it is I'd like to see this working group be a part of this whole project. But I support this project. I wanted you to be aware of that.
Thank you very much. Okay, let's... do we have anything further? Let's move on to item 4F, discuss cove dredging permit. Mr. Patterson?
Yes, this was another item that you asked that we bring back to you. I've given you a brief synopsis as well as attached a lot of documents with that. If you look at that, you will see that we did amend our first permit application based on public comment. The agency we're dealing with, too, wanted us to keep that those spoils in the Clackamas and Willamette corridor, which the permit provides for. So if there are changes we wish to redo, we'd need to know what those are. That will move this project back. I think you see the correspondence there from the Corps that pretty well verifies that, as well as I think, too, if you move it back, you probably are risking losing your partner, which is the county, which is funding half of this at this particular time. So it's really wherever you wish to go with this.
Commissioner Neely.
First of all, is this something that's likely still to be done in this season? I mean, we're so far into it now.
We are far into it. I don't know if it will get done this season. I know that the permit is near being approved, but you know, I don't have a time frame for you.
Well, let me. I think we're going to have people commenting on something that's been coming around. It's actually something I brought out at a previous. I don't even remember now if it was a city commission meeting or a renewal commission meeting, but to actually use this dredging material within the cove to create areas that could be used for shorebirds and so forth. The thing is, I don't want to derail this process. I would say this is probably not the only dredging that's going to occur at the mouth of that. I mean, I'm sure that in time we're going to see materials build up there. Sure. It's going to be it needs to be an ongoing thing because to preserve the cove, especially for the investments that we're going to use, we've got to find a mechanism where we can continue this dredging activity. Whether the notion of bringing material into the cove at this time is really feasible without really losing the support of the county, versus whether that can actually be built into a longer-term plan, I think is something that we need to that we need to talk about, because I do see environmental benefits within the cove itself, not only for shorebirds, but you may be able to create some. I'll call it, quote, nesting habitat for western pond turtles, which I don't know we have in the cove at this point, but I think they could be reintroduced into the area and have an area where these things you can actually reproduce and so forth. I know they're listed as sensitive species. I know they've been recommended for the endangered species list. I don't know they've been listed yet at this point, but it is a threatened. It is a species that's regarded as sensitive because of habitat loss. So whether we take some suggestions that have been coming forward from the public in terms of using some of that dredge material within the cove itself, whether we can do it at this stage in the game may be a sort of a moot point.
Yeah, we'd have to amend the permit this way.
Yeah, and I would suggest before we even suggest amending the permit to talk to the county to see if we lose them in the process, but I do see some benefits. But the point is, I think something like that can be done in the future, because with those dredging activities will have to occur in the future.
Commissioner Nocita.
Okay. I wonder, I've been thinking about this too, and I've had discussions with the members of the public who are interested in this. And in reading all the traffic about the dredge permit, it just dawned on me that that was a hang-up, and I think we could move the discussion a lot forward if we decoupled the habitat enhancement from the current dredging permit. In other words, let the dredging permit proceed as it's planned. It would be, logistically difficult to change course in midstream on the dredging permit. So just let that go and, let that proceed as it's...
Right.
And do something as far as a habitat enhancement plan under a separate process. I mean, I think it would involve a separate, 404 permit. But you get into the same issues, and you'd have to do cut and fill balancing, because this would be fill. But again, you could find other places within the area to get, the fill material to place in. I've had thoughts like this with many islands, and to get back to the shading issue, I could foresee constructing small islands throughout the cove and planting willows and cottonwoods that would, again, provide even more shade directly to the water. So I think, and I've also been in contact with some of these agency folks that have said that, yes, there are a lot of grants for this, and that would be economic development, and ecological enhancement at the same time. So I would propose that we take a look into that idea of habitat enhancement with the creations of islands in the cove, separate and distinct from how the dredge spoils in the current permit are going to be used. And I'd also, because I know we're running out of time, I want to move the idea of this interjurisdictional working group forward by moving that we create such and have Commissioner Neely be our representative to it.
I think that's kind of premature. But no, I agree with your notion of decoupling. I think this habitat, producing better habitat in the cove is important, but I agree with you. I think we need to decouple it from this particular item.
Do you agree with the idea of forming a working group tonight?
Sure. Absolutely.
Okay, I would move that we form a working group, an interjurisdictional working group.
Okay, does your motion include moving forward on the dredge permit?
It's completely separate from the dredge.
That's what I mean.
Yeah.
Move forward on the dredge permit and form a working group to do these other issues.
Well, I think
you'd like to make those in two separate motions.
It's silent on the dredging permit, and it
that's
just
fair
leaves it
enough.
alone.
Okay.
So I would move that the Urban Renewal Commission form an interjurisdictional working group.
I would like you to reverse the order of your motions, because we have public here that want to speak to the latter thing, I do believe. So if that's your notion, I suggest that you go ahead and move what's before us on the agenda.
Well,
And then
that's not necessary for any kind of, that's an existing permit that's going to be given. We don't, the only reason we brought it up was to make sure that we clear the air on the fact that,
in that case, he's going to be silent on it, so go ahead with the motion he's doing then.
Yeah. I move that the Urban Renewal Commission create an interjurisdictional working group to explore options for creating habitat enhancement, including habitat islands within the Clackamas Cove.
I second the motion.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Do we have discussion? Well, we also have a card on this topic from Mr. Edgar. So, did you want to?
I think this other issue all by itself.
Yeah, I think he's to the dredging.
He's on the dredging.
Yeah.
Unless you want me to talk about it right now.
Well, let's finish this motion. Do we have any? Does somebody else want to talk about this?
Just a comment. I was looking through some files.
You need to come up to the.
I was looking through some files the other day and happened to notice that the start of the engineering for the dredging to prepare the permit was in August 2 years ago. So these things take an incredible amount of time. And I think I would agree with Commissioner Nacita's idea of decoupling. Because if you decouple, then you're going to extend that permit for another 2 years.
Do we have any discussion with the commission? Commissioner Norris.
I guess I would want to be clear about what the group is to do and who staffs it. So, I mean, I think
You may have one other question that you may need to ask, and again, this is strictly up to the commission, but you have a concept that these gentlemen are working on in regards to the cove. I know when you get a number of different governmental jurisdictions together, you can come up with lots of different concepts. Some may or may not blend with what's being talked about here in terms of the marketability as well. It may help, it may hurt. I think we may be overworking this development to the point that, I've got another idea, and this thing keeps rolling. Very difficult to keep something moving along.
I don't think that this has any bearing on the development itself. I think that moves forward. But I thought in the discussion that the developers were actually being included in this group. Did I misunderstand that?
No, it is so understood. Yeah.
So, and I think this group's advisory from the perspective of bringing something hopefully back that will work.
Yeah, exactly.
Really.
And I'd point out the Cove is still under city ownership. I mean, how we look at it as a natural resource will be a continuing discussion over time. There is no ownership that's taken over by the Cove itself by this development. Clearly, we would want to do things that were compatible with the development that goes in there, and I think this is a given. But I think the concept of bringing these things in and talking about the longer-term natural enhancements that can occur beyond the ones that they are taking on. I realize you're going to do something in what we're calling that peninsula and so forth, are going to go forward. But I think there's still possibilities beyond it. I mean, what they're talking about internally to the Cove itself is primarily places of boat launch and so forth. Obviously, we want something that's visually pleasing, but that in the long term also enhances the natural habitat even beyond what we're talking about in terms of the development.
I think Commissioner Norris was next.
Well, my question's again, who's this group responsible to? So who's it report to? So I'm kind of unclear about that. Again, and their specific charge, the length of is it a task force? What's the length of the time? Is this like ongoing, or does it have a specific mission to accomplish? And then I think thirdly, how many jurisdictions do we see? I mean, is it Gladstone, the county, the state? What is it that we want here? I think I'd like a little time to settle on that.
Is it possible that we could ask Commissioner Neely to come back as the chair of this new committee?
I would not. First of all, I would never suggest the advisory committee include a member of the commission. I think they may have undue influence either way. That is, people might kind of defer to it, or people might react the opposite way. I would not recommend a member of the commission be on it.
I want to make a clarifying amendment to my motion, because I want to make clear that it's not just interjurisdictional, but multi-stakeholder, including the developers of the Cove, to make sure that it's just not government agencies.
This is a relatively new subject tonight. Is it possible you could come
Yes.
back to the next meeting
Yes.
and really clarify, some of the questions that are being asked, and then we could vote on something that has some. I don't. The Cove's going to be out there. This dredging potential is going to be for a long time. And I think waiting for next week's meeting is not.
I have no problem with that personally.
What do you think?
If that's the sense of the commission, I don't mind withdrawing the motion and bringing back more details.
I think Commissioner Norris's points are well taken. We need to identify some staff member to whom this works. I know we had issues with other advisory committees that haven't worked too well. Part of that, I think, had to do with the internal problems within the advisory committee as opposed to having an advisory committee in its own right. This would be specific, and frankly, in terms of some of the overall, I think we could set the. I hate to use the parameters because statisticians use parameters for a very different reason than people that make policies do.
Framework.
Framework. That's all. Set up, perhaps setting up the framework and be part of the initial responsibilities of the advisory committee working with this particular commission. So I do think it's important that we identify a staff member. I do think that the broad specifics of what they're going to cover can be dealt with actually in conjunction with the formation of the advisory committee itself. But we'll just go ahead and postpone that until the next meeting.
In light of the short of time, would the two of you work together? You and Commissioner Nocita?
I think all
And
all
whoever
of
else
us
is,
need to
yeah,
yeah.
whoever's I mean, to bring something back to us next meeting that we can act on, and if we'll put that on the agenda. Did Mr. Egger, you were signed up for item?
Thank you. Paul Edgar, Land Use Chairman of the Kenema Neighborhood Association and an involved citizen of Oregon City. I brought up part of the question about the dredging permit primarily because we had a rush when it went in to figure out a place when Danielson said you can't move the spoils over across the river that would impact his riverbank, and somebody says, oh, we can put it out in the Clackamas Cove along the Willamette River there, and now all of a sudden we realize that the Clackamas Cove floods every year, maybe twice a year, and where we would put the spoils, there's about a 99% probability that they would go down and make the conditions worse in the Willamette River at Milton Bar and other areas. Right now, you cannot even get a sternwheeler up, and the one that was supposed to come up into Oregon City can no longer do this because of the problems of gravel. So this loose gravel will impact the water health and the navigability of the river and the economy of Oregon City and even the locks and some of the planned use. So it didn't really add up to being a very smart move, what we set about doing. In fact, any common sense would tell us that it's probably the worst possible place we could do it. So one of the thoughts was, well, positively, let's look at the positive side. How could we do something smarter? And the fact that, by the way, the Corps, and I've had some direct conversation, including with the Colonel, they do not envision further dredging, period. Year after year, out in out times, they're saying this is a one-time dredge. This is counter all ecological plans. We're going to let you go on it, but don't look at coming back to us again. So any rumor that talks about doing some of this other stuff, I said, well, why don't we look at trying to enhance the quality of the ecological environment around the cove, plus let's take some intelligent looks at how do we make water health in the cove better. Is there some things we could do? And I was very impressed, Mayor, when we had the CHP group here, and I thought to myself, wow, why don't we pull together a whole lot of people who are concerned about the environment, about fish and wildlife and riparian worlds, and do what you were trying to do with the CHP, but bring these people together and pragmatically and honestly, with critical thinking, come up and evaluate what are good practices and principles, what can we be doing that's smart. And I would like to see us try to do this, because right now we made a slipshod move and said, okay, let's throw that gravel over there in an area that's going to be worse. And yeah, I understand we've got a problem.
So
we don't want to disrupt this thing.
Your time's almost up.
But I would turn around and tell you that we've got to be smarter. And so far, we're not really displaying everything that we could and should do. And I'd like to encourage us to get smarter and incorporate bringing people together.
Thank you. Commissioner Neely.
Just one thing. I don't know that any agency can say, well, we're going to do this thing, and this is the last time we're going to do this. I think policies change, and I think it's a case really of finding more appropriate areas for that. But I'm not convinced at all that we're not going to try to, at one point, 5 years, 10 years down the line, look for future dredging permits. Become a political issue. Once it becomes hot enough, the Corps will probably respond and work with us. So I'm not too concerned if a given agency in fact has said this is a one-time thing. I don't know if they have said that, and even if they had said that, it's not necessarily true.
In the
Okay,
government
Commissioner
business,
Crocker.
nothing's forever.
That's right.
Mr. Clark,
I'd like to make a motion, we proceed with current permit application.
Well, we don't need that.
Great.
We don't need to do
Perfect.
that. Mr. Patterson, do you have a report? You have, on the agenda, we have manager's report.
I have nothing.
That was very good. Then, seeing no other business,
I have a question
Commissioner
for the
Nocita?
manager. I would just like an update on the rivers.
We're still working on the development agreement. I have not had an opportunity this week to talk to Mr. Janik and where that's at, but hopefully we'll have that turned out here shortly. Then it will be the ball will be in the Center Cal's court to determine whether that agreement meets our satisfaction, and if it does, then we can bring something to you for you to look at and see if it's an issue that you want to approve or not approve.
Commissioner Norris.
If there are no objections, the work session will begin at 7:15.
Meeting's